1909. It is a restless world in 1909, marked by diplomatic tensions, wide-ranging social and technological developments. The worldwide women's suffrage movement is gaining momentum. Guglielmo Marconi is awarded a Nobel Prize for his discoveries in radiotelegraphy. Leo Baekeland invents the first plastic, Bakelite. Albert Einstein publishes visionary new physics theories. A revolution in shipbuilding is taking place as steam-powered, iron-hulled ships are constructed. The keel of RMS Titanic was laid. Aircraft make their first tentative flights. Louis Blériot flies across the English Channel. The U.S. Army flies its first airplane, a modified Wright Brothers Model A. Glenn Curtiss signs a contract with the U.S. Navy to develop naval aircraft. Worldwide diplomatic, economic, and social tensions are growing. Ethnic unease rises between Serbia and Austria-Hungary, presaging the outbreak of World War I. Germany, England, Japan, France, America build large fleets of warships to support their national goals. The American Great White Fleet returns to Virginia after an around-the-world voyage, demonstrating its ability to project American foreign policy. Japan has defeated the Russian Army and Navy at Port Arthur, China, and expand into Manchuria. The Japanese occupy Korea with the secret approval of President Roosevelt. Tokyo Mayor Yukio Ozaki presents Washington with 2,000 cherry blossom trees. Despite this act of friendship, construction begins on the U.S. naval base at Pearl Harbor as the United States warily guards its interests in the Pacific. Into this world, a young boy was born in Oklahoma, land of the 5 civilized tribes. But none of the 5 tribes claimed him, and he grew up as an American, with American hopes and dreams. He would become an American hero. Ernest Edwin Evans would seek out the American dream while following in the footsteps of his tribal ancestors. He would become a warrior, an American warrior. Ernest Evans was born August 13, 1909, in Shawnee, Oklahoma, son of William Charles and Anna Maloney Evans. He was the oldest of 4 children. William Charles had trouble finding work, and the family lived in poverty. They moved occasionally as William tried to find a job. In 1923, they moved to Muskogee, where Ernest began attending Muskogee Central High School. He was not particularly athletic, although he enthusiastically joined in. In 1925, he participated in the track meet at Norman, Oklahoma. His performance was not notable, and he failed to place. However, he loved to read, and he was sociable. He was a member of many school clubs and social organizations. He was a member of the Latin Club, the House of Representatives Club. He was on the yearbook staff, member of the Press Association Club, Forum Club, M-Service Club, debate team, and senior pen and ring committee. He even had a part in the senior play. Perhaps he drew inspiration from the books he read, Jack London and Herman Melville's adventure novels. He would have been familiar with historical events and figures such as John Paul Jones and the exploits of USS Constitution. Perhaps he read of the Civil War duel between Monitor and Merrimack, or Admiral David Farragut at the Battle of Mobile Bay. As an Oklahoman, he was familiar with the exploits of the great chiefs Osceola, Minowa, Tishomingo, Pushmataha, and Okonos Tota. and there were plenty of contemporary heroes to admire. He was probably present at Hatbox Field when the U.S. Army's round-the-world flight landed there in 1924. The 1926 Central High Yearbook bears the inscription next to his senior portrait, "He has the courage of his convictions." Only 16 years old, and he was already thought of as courageous. Upon graduation in 1926, he faced an uncertain future. Without a scholarship or patron, college was out of the question. Should he stay in Muskogee, become an oil field roustabout, or perhaps a store clerk at a grocery or hardware store? Ernest chose the way of the warrior. He enlisted in the U.S. Navy. After a year of basic training, he applied by fleet competition for appointment to the U.S. Naval Academy in Annapolis, Maryland, and was accepted. His score was the highest in that group. The results of a word association test tell something about his character. Of the 50 questions, he missed 2. The first multiple choice question asked, "Which of the following always goes with a meal?" The correct answer was food. He chose hunger, a subject he probably knew something about. The second asked, "Which of the following always goes with a sporting contest?" The correct answer was an opponent. He chose victory. I can just imagine what members of the Annapolis Selection Committee thought when they looked at the results of Ernest Evans' test. A young man who hungered for victory? This was just the type of officer the U.S. Navy wanted. And in Annapolis, he fit in just as he had at Central High School. He actively participated in social gatherings. His habit of reading did not go unnoticed. He gained a reputation for being intellectual and could be counted on to be conversant about religion, philosophy, and current events. Yet, his intellectual prowess was of a more informal, self-guided variety. His official academic record was less impressive, perhaps due to an emphasis on leisure and reading. He graduated relatively far down in his class at 321st of 441 classmates. But his fellow midshipmen said he was quick with a joke, usually wore a smile, and made friends easily. He was, by all accounts, a nice guy. Evans graduated in 1931 with a Master of Science degree. The Great Depression was in full swing. Evans joining the Navy once might have seemed a compromise to a bad situation, but now, with steady employment and the opportunity to develop a real career, turned out to be a fortuitous choice. Soon after graduation, Evans married Margaret Bell Wilfong of Laneville, West Virginia. They had 2 sons, Ernest Jr. in 1932 and Jerry in 1933. Ernest Jr. would go on to a successful career, attaining the rank of colonel in the United States Marine Corps. After graduation, Evans applied for pilot's training at Pensacola, Florida. His decision may have been influenced by several headline events at Hatbox Field, the U.S. Army's first dedicated airfield. In addition to the visit by the World Flyers in 1924, Charles Lindbergh and Amelia Earhart both visited there while Evans was at Annapolis. Evans eventually washed out, apparently due to a lack of hand-eye coordination. He was then assigned to a series of warships, the battleship Colorado, and destroyers Roper and Rathburn. In August 1933, as a JG, he returned to Pensacola for aerial gunnery observation training. That February, he was assigned to Aviation Scouting Squadron 9 aboard USS Pensacola as an observer. For 3.5 years, Evans enjoyed the exhilaration of flight, even though only as a passenger. Whether he gave it any thought or not, Evans was now qualified to eventually command an aircraft carrier, should that possibility ever occur. The Navy noted his abilities, and in 1937 was assigned to USS Chaumont. This placed Evans right in the middle of the war between China and Japan. Chaumont carried the 6th Marine Regiment to Shanghai, where they would protect the international settlement during Chinese and Japanese fighting to control the city. Chaumont suffered damage in 2 mishaps, a grounding and a collision with the Italian cruiser Raimondo Montecuccoli. The ship then returned to the States for repairs. In June 1938, Evans was given an innocuous assignment as captain of USS Cahokia, YT-135. During his time as Cahokia's commander, he advanced in rank to full lieutenant. Cahokia was a small, unassuming yard tugboat stationed in San Francisco Harbor. However, his command of the small ship would give him invaluable experience in handling large ships. Part of Evans' duties was to act as harbor pilot, guiding ships in through the shoals and sandbars around the entrance to the bay. One day, Evans was given the chance to bring USS Saratoga in. As he took the con, his appearance in dungarees without insignia gave Saratoga's crew the impression that the swarthy pilot was a competent local civilian. That evening, they were surprised when Evans showed up in full dress blue uniform at a ship's party. In July 1940, he was transferred to USS Blackhawk, AD-9, a destroyer tender. He was now following in the footsteps of William Halsey. Evans was clearly being groomed for higher command. In August 1941, Lieutenant Evans was transferred to USS Alden, DD-211, then part of the Asiatic Fleet in the Southwest Pacific Ocean. This was perhaps fortunate for Evans because the skipper of Alden was Lieutenant Commander Lewis Coley, graduate of Oklahoma City Central High School and member of the Annapolis Class of 24. Coley and Evans must have found their time together agreeable, because in the first week of December 1941, we find Ernest Evans standing on the bridge of USS Alden as executive officer. Evans is on the verge of attaining the goal he has sought since graduation in 1926. He is married and has 2 sons. He is undoubtedly in line for command of a fighting ship, maybe even an aircraft carrier, which brought the possibility of attaining flag rank. And he did it the hard way, up from poverty, through the ranks, Annapolis, without a political benefactor, and he did it in peacetime. He was just 32 years old. And then the Japanese attacked Pearl Harbor. On December 7, 1941, Alden is cruising east of the island of Borneo in the Makassar Strait near the strategically important oil town of Balikpapan as part of the Asiatic Fleet. The fleet then engages in a series of battles against the Japanese along with America's allies, the Australian, British, and Dutch navies. By March, the Allied fleet has been defeated, and Alden is forced to retreat into Australian waters. Lewis Coley is reassigned. Evans is given command of Alden. June 1942 finds Alden in Hawaiian waters performing convoy escort duty, and Evans is promoted to lieutenant commander. In July 1943, after 3 months of anti-submarine patrols in the Atlantic, he is promoted to full commander and is assigned to new construction at Seattle, Washington, the Fletcher-class destroyer Johnston, DD-557. The Fletcher class in 1943 was the most sophisticated, technologically advanced weapon of its type in the world. Its crew could see in the dark with new top-secret technologies of infrared and radar. Its 5-inch guns were equally suited to attack aircraft as well as ships, and they were controlled by a revolutionary, radar-guided, computer-aided gunfire control system. The shells could sense when near a target and automatically detonate. It was armed with torpedoes, depth charges, anti-aircraft guns, and sonar. It had radios that could receive and transmit around the world and was as fast as almost any warship in the world at 35 knots. With this ship, Evans could fight the Japanese on equal terms. His challenge would be to train his crew. At that time, the core cadre of veteran sailors in the U.S. Navy was spread thinly over the ever-increasing number of new ships. Johnston would be crewed by mostly young, raw, green recruits, many of whom had never been to sea. Perhaps this is why he ordered ship's doctor, Robert Brown, to organize a commissioning party for the crew and to make sure they were supplied with plenty of medicinal alcohol, for strictly therapeutic purposes, you understand. A suitable ballroom was rented and the commissioning party occurred. It was a success if judged by the number of bruises and black eyes of the crew the next day. The bill for the damages was $10,000. But Evans had beat the desire for drink and shore leave from his men, and he began to prepare them for what was to come. At the commissioning ceremony, he gave a speech that sobered his crew up fast. He told them of his experience aboard Alden fighting the Japanese. He said that he would never again retreat from an enemy. He stated, "I intend to go in harm's way, and anybody that doesn't want to go along better get off right now." Well, to their credit, nobody in his young crew took his advice, and their training at sea began. An example of the problems he faced occurred on Johnston's first day of scheduled gunnery practice with the 5-inch guns and the revolutionary gunfire control system. Johnston navigated out to the gunnery range, and Evans ordered Chief Gunnery Officer Robert Hagan, himself a bloodied veteran and Silver Star recipient, to begin the training exercise. Hagan ordered his young gunners to destroy the target in the distance. The men stationed at each gun were instructed to put their gunfire control selector levers into the full automatic position, and the guns were commanded to aim at the target. They began moving and pointed 180 degrees in the opposite direction. Hagan's young gunner's mates quickly began troubleshooting the problem, and after much head-scratching and flipping through pages of technical documents, Hagan gave up and resorted to what was then a unique occurrence, an event that today in our computerized, internet-connected world happens every day. He called computer tech support. Johnston pulled into a convenient port where Hagan went ashore, dialed the phone number supplied with the equipment, and before long 2 factory representatives appeared. They were rowed out to Johnston in a dinghy, climbed aboard, and went down into the interior communications plot compartment where the gunfire control computer and switchboard were located. They studied the switchboard, which almost filled the entire compartment. It was covered with levers, dials, and knobs. One representative flipped a switch and confidently declared, "It's fixed." And the sheepish young gunners bid the 2 factory representatives farewell. Johnston weighed anchor, the training session successfully repeated, and the target was satisfactorily destroyed. Not long after, Robert Hagan wrote in a letter to an officer friend that in the future he should give Johnston a wide berth. Anything could happen. Johnston's crew then performed more surface gunnery drills, torpedo attack drills, torpedo attack defense drills, anti-aircraft drills, anti-submarine, smokescreen, abandoned ship, refueling at sea, and all the myriad drills required for the business of crewing a fighting destroyer. Ready or not, the time for Johnston to head for the war was approaching. One morning before setting out, it was discovered a man was missing. The chief boatswain's mate, a 7-year veteran, apparently wanted nothing to do with Ernest Evans and the war. He went AWOL, jumped ship, went over the hill. This put Evans in a real fix. A chief boatswain's mate on a small ship like a destroyer was a key man, and the best time to replace him would be before the ship left the States, and Evans could have his pick of whomever he could sweet talk into joining the ship. So, Evans went ashore to the replacement depot, where he found 6-year veteran Clyde Burnett waiting for an assignment. Burnett had recently advanced in rank to chief boatswain's mate, and in doing so had advanced himself out of a job in the submarine service. Subs didn't rate a chief at this time, so he'd been sent ashore to await reassignment. Burnett later said Evans had given him such a sob story he was almost in tears. I can imagine Evans saying, "Clyde, with Johnston's green crew and no experienced chief to protect them, they would be dead meat for the Japanese. They'll sink the ship, murder the crew, and shoot the ship's mascot." Well, there was no mascot, but you get the idea. So Johnston sailed westward with a full crew. At the invasion of Kwajalein, we get an example of how Evans would use Johnston in battle and his fighting style. Johnston had been assigned a sector of beach to provide gunfire support to the Marines ashore. A lull in the fighting occurred as the Marines had eliminated all Japanese resistance in Johnston's sector. Evans could see there was still fighting going on in a nearby sector, so he moved the ship over there to help out. The admiral in charge of the invasion, Richard Connolly, did not think this was a good idea and reprimanded Evans for leaving his assigned sector. But we see that Evans would not wait for trouble to find him. He would go looking for trouble. In May 1944, Johnston was given credit for sinking a Japanese submarine. As confirmation of the good job Evans had done training his crew, he was awarded a Bronze Star. By now, Robert Hagen was bragging to his friends to bring on the entire Japanese Navy. In less than a year, Johnston participated in 5 Battle Star operations. Johnston's crew considered themselves to be one of the best gunfire support ships in the fleet. At the invasion of Guam, Johnston fired more than 4,000 rounds of 5-inch ammunition at the Japanese in just 9 days. That's enough ammunition to fill Johnston's ammunition magazines twice over. On Friday, October 20th, 1944, Johnston was participating in its 6th Battle Star operation, the invasion of the island of Leyte in the Philippines. Johnston and the 7th Fleet had brought General Douglas MacArthur and the 6th U.S. Army to the Philippines to make good on MacArthur's promise to the Filipino people that, "I shall return." The only problem was that Johnston was not part of a gunfire support unit. Johnston was not even near the island of Leyte. It was far away to the rear, 30 miles east of a nearby island, Samar, protecting small escort carriers. Why, didn't the admiral know that Johnston was the best fire support ship in the fleet, and that assigning Johnston to escort duty was a tragic misappropriation of government men and materiel? Escort carriers were small aircraft carriers originally designed to provide anti-submarine aircraft patrols to convoys crossing the Atlantic. At the Leyte invasion, they were providing close air support and combat air patrols over the invasion area as well. They were cheaply built, slow, had very little defensive armament, and needed additional protection. Johnston and several other ships were with a group of 6 escort carriers known by its radio call sign, Taffy 3. Taffy 3 was the most northern group of 7th Fleet ships. As such, Taffy 3 guarded the 7th Fleet's northern flank. Just to the north of Taffy 3 were the ships of Admiral William Halsey's 3rd Fleet, which included 12 large Essex-class carriers and 1,000 of the most modern fighting aircraft in the world. With such a large fleet protecting the invasion, Johnston's escort duties seemed redundant and unnecessary. So Johnston plodded back and forth in its dreary escort duty. Its crew scanned the sky for enemy planes, sounded the depths for enemy submarines. They fished the occasional pilot out of the waters of the Pacific Ocean when, for some reason, they didn't land on the deck of an aircraft carrier. However, this was dull work. It was routine and boring, and some of Johnston's officers began expressing a desire to see more action. So it's no surprise Evans and his officers listened with interest to radio reports of Japanese ship movements in the area. On October 23rd, word was received of the sinking of 2 Japanese cruisers by a pair of American submarines. The next day, they heard reports of battles between American aircraft and approaching groups of Japanese warships. That day, a major battle broke out between 3rd Fleet aircraft and a fleet of Japanese battleships. On the afternoon of the 24th, word was received of Japanese aircraft carriers far to the north. Admiral Halsey thought this was a significant development. He really wanted to sink Japanese aircraft carriers. That evening, as darkness fell over the Pacific, Admiral Halsey interviewed the pilots that attacked the Japanese battleships. They said they had sunk some ships and damaged the rest so badly that they reversed course and fled the area. Admiral Halsey was of the opinion that the Japanese battleships were no longer a threat to the invasion area, and that he was going to take the entire 3rd Fleet and go after the Japanese carriers. His staff sent a message to 7th Fleet informing them of Admiral Halsey's intentions. However, they gave the mistaken impression that there would be 3rd Fleet ships guarding 7th Fleet's northern flank. This was not the case. Just before midnight on the 24th, the entire 3rd Fleet sailed away north in the darkness, and nobody in the 7th Fleet was the wiser. In the early morning hours of Wednesday, October 25th, radio reports of a battle between 7th Fleet ships and an approaching Japanese force to the south were received. Like officers throughout all the Taffies, Evans listened in. When it became obvious the battle had been won, he retired to his sea cabin to get a few minutes' sleep and prepare for the next day. That Wednesday, as the sun rose above the Pacific, strange things were happening. Evans had been interrupted several times by reports of phantom radar contacts of ship movements to the north. Japanese voices were heard on the radio, indicating there might be Japanese nearby. The pilot of a Taffy-3 anti-submarine patrol aircraft reported radar contact with ships to the west and was investigating. This morning there was a dark storm front obscuring the horizon to the west. Normally the mountain tops of the island of Samar would be visible, but today they were obscured by rain squalls and clouds. These ships could be a group of friendly U.S. Navy ships sent to refuel the ships of Taffy-3, which had been scheduled that day. Moments later, anti-aircraft fire was visible to the west, and the pilot reported he was being fired upon. It could be that there were some trigger-happy gunners on these ships, firing at friendly aircraft. This sort of thing happened all the time in World War II. Moments later, the pilot excitedly reported that the ships were, in fact, Japanese, and that there were 4 battleships, 8 cruisers, and many destroyers rapidly approaching Taffy-3. And the men of Taffy-3 slowly began to realize their doom was approaching. Evans had been through this before, and he quickly prepared Johnston for battle, laid a smokescreen, and briefed his officers on what would happen next. As the Japanese battleship shells began raining down around the aircraft carriers of Taffy-3 and Johnston, Evans ordered a torpedo attack. The leading Japanese cruiser was hit by a torpedo. Its bow was blown off. For the next 2.5 hours, Evans fought back against the Japanese. Johnston was hit and damaged badly. Many of its crew were wounded and killed. Evans himself was wounded badly early on in the battle, but he continued commanding the ship until the very end. Eventually, Johnston was disabled and unable to offer resistance to the enemy, and Evans had one final duty to perform. He gave the order to abandon ship and instructions to see to the safe evacuation of the wounded. The last anyone saw of Captain Evans, he was walking the deck of Johnston looking for survivors. None of the survivors saw how he met his demise that day. He was wounded badly and had gone for 2.5 hours refusing medical treatment. He could simply have succumbed to his wounds. He might have been killed by the continuing Japanese gunfire. Or, after satisfying himself all the wounded were safely evacuated, he could have stepped into the sea, lost consciousness, and simply drowned. Nobody could recall how he met his fate. But what we do know is that Ernest Evans helped save the lives of 7,000 of his fellow sailors that day, and his tragic death gave the United States a triumphant victory over the Japanese. Evans, the crew of Johnston, and the men of the Taffys fought the Japanese fleet to a standstill and forced them to flee to the safety of distant waters. The invasion would continue unimpeded, and the United States would defeat the Japanese Empire without suffering a humiliating setback. As a result of their actions, the men of Taffy-3 were recognized as a group by Presidential Unit Citation. Additionally awarded 25 October for the more widespread battle that day, 15 men were recipients of the Legion of Merit. 393 men received the Navy Cross. 1 Distinguished Service Medal was awarded. 111 men received the Silver Star. 238 pilots were awarded the Distinguished Flying Cross, and 114 men received a Bronze Star. Only 1 man was awarded the Medal of Honor. On 26 August 1945, Evans was awarded the Medal of Honor posthumously. So, by remembering what these brave men did that day, we honor them and honor Ernest Evans, the bravest of them all.